Welcome to Christian Parent Crazy World, the podcast that tackles tough topics to help you be a godly parent in an ungodly world. I am your host, Catherine Seegers, and in today's episode, we will tackle this very compelling question. Do we have a deep-seated desire in life that is sabotaging us as parents, actually just as believers? Look, I know that I have struggled with this desire for much of my life. I suspect that you have too. So today, I'm going to share some deeply personal journeys of some people I've known and part of my own journey to a destination that always seems out of reach. I want to share these stories with you because I know that you can relate. They all focus on a single dangerous desire. This desire, you guys, it's like quicksand. It will sabotage our parenting and our purpose if we let it. But don't worry, we will turn the corner on this dangerous desire and we are going to uproot it and focus on what we really need, what we are really looking for. That's the plan for this episode of Christian Parent Crazy World. So let's get started. So this is going to be a scaled back, really personal episode from my heart. But before I reveal what this dangerous desire is, I want to share a few stories with you that will really bring this message home. I think that you may see yourself in some of these stories. I sure do. And at first, you may not see the connection, but trust me, the dots will connect. So one of my dearest friends in life desperately wanted to have a large family. She was one of 9 kids herself, and she always assumed that she would fill her house with children. But she didn't. She and her husband only had 1 child, and she is now an empty nester. And honestly, I thought that she had pretty much made peace with this reality in her life. But just recently, she told me, "Do you know, Catherine, I still struggle with this. It still hurts. I still wonder why we couldn't have more kids." I have another dear friend who didn't have any kids, desperately wanted children more than anything. Then 14 years into her marriage, her husband left her. He married another woman and had kids with her. Yeah, talk about rubbing salt in the wound. Now she is a middle-aged woman who is single and childless. I have another friend, a relative actually, who never married at all. She always thought she would. She is now in her 60s. And like Dr. Lena Abujamra, who I interviewed in the last couple of episodes, she never found the one. And she is constantly surrounded by couples with children and now grandchildren. And she has her dog. I have another friend whose father left her as a young child, literally dropped her mother off at the hospital as she was going into labor with their 4th child, and he ran off with another woman from the church. Oh, and by the way, he was a minister. Some sick stuff happening there. Yeah. My friend has some major father wounds, and she has so many friends with wonderful dads who didn't reject them, who didn't leave, who were there as they grew up, who are still there. Okay, so these next couple of stories may seem a little superficial, comparatively speaking, but trust me, they aren't. If you had to deal with these things, it would be really rough. I had this acting professor back in graduate school who became a very dear friend of mine, and we did a lot of shows together. This woman was beautiful. She had this peaches and cream glowing complexion, but somehow in her late 30s, she came in contact with some toxins or something, and her skin began to erupt with these enormous mountainous cysts on her face that would leave behind huge discolored craters. Now, she's an actor, mind you. It is really hard to get cast when your face, I'm sorry, it kind of looked like a mountain range. And one day I remember she was really late for a class that she was teaching. And she came in and her face was covered with this thick veneer of makeup. And her eyes were bloodshot from crying her guts out. And I knew it took every ounce of courage that she could muster to get out of the house that day. She was desperately trying to cover up what she couldn't cover up, and she knew it wasn't working. But she was surrounded by people who didn't think twice about leaving the house, who didn't have to cover up something humiliating just to walk out the door, who instantly said yes when their agent called for another audition. And I've got another friend who from very early childhood felt defective. She had this very thin head of hair and she could barely get a single ponytail out of it. And then when she started to have kids, her hair broke and fell out, and then so much that she couldn't cover her head. And she would read scriptures about how a woman's hair is her glory and her covering. And she wondered why she didn't have a glory, why she didn't have a covering. Everybody else did. Knew another woman who struggled with her weight. No matter what she did, she could not lose weight. And she was really tired of it. She ate like a bird, exercised to no avail. She was still overweight. I've had several friends who have struggled with life-threatening illnesses. Why them? Like forms of breast cancer at a young age or some other debilitating, life-threatening illness. And they had lots of kids at home, and they would sit in a room filled with healthy moms as they pulled down their caps over their balding heads, wondering if they were going to beat this thing. Got a dear friend who struggles terribly every single day with financial setbacks. Not enough. They aren't month to month. They are not week to week. They are day to day. Sometimes it feels like minute to minute. And she is surrounded by people who have big houses and savings accounts and 401ks. And for some reason, that just hasn't happened for her family. And she doesn't know why. And she's so tired of struggling for what every other family seems to have. I knew a family once, such a precious couple. Both of them are geniuses, like literally geniuses, seriously high IQs, brilliant. But their firstborn child has severe mental disabilities. He's nonverbal, has to wear a helmet everywhere. He would hurt himself if he was not constantly supervised, can't even go to the bathroom by himself. And now he's a teenager, and his father has to sleep in the den because otherwise he would get out of the house and run away. And they had a second child who was brilliantly smart, but the third child was born with impaired hearing and a degenerative eye disease that threatens to take her sight and leave her as a modern-day Helen Keller. And I was like, seriously, God, wasn't the struggle with their first child enough? And they have no family support. And they came to stay in town in a hotel where my husband worked, and I offered to watch their kids so they could go downstairs and celebrate their wedding anniversary at a restaurant by themselves. And they were so appreciative. And you know what they told me? Oh my gosh, I could not believe this. This was the first time they had ever gone out to dinner by themselves since their son was born 15 years ago. Never went out to dinner as a couple alone. Their family never helped. And they were surrounded by families with healthy kids, but they have this incredible burden without a support network. But you know, I know so many parents right now who are going through a very different kind of struggle with their kids, parent after parent after parent, who trained up their child in the way they should go. And their child isn't old yet, but they have departed. They have left the faith. And some of these kids are on very destructive paths. And the parents look around at all these other parents who did all the same things that they did, and they got a very different result. And they wonder why. But this desire, this common quest became so clear to me one day when I was rocking one of my babies to sleep, and I turned on the television and I stumbled across a documentary on TLC, which is the Learning Channel. It was about this woman in Great Britain who, in her own words, was defective. Now, this woman was single, and she wasn't a Christian, and this is where it gets a little bit PG-13. And I say that knowing full well I've really got your attention now, right? But this woman, she was incapable of experiencing pleasure when intimate with a man. Okay, enough said. So this woman, she went to doctor after doctor after doctor, trying to figure out why she was broken. And they had no answers for her. And I will never forget this. She said, every room I go into, I look around and I know I'm the only woman in here who has this problem. And it was like, I don't have that problem, but I know that thought. I know that thought very well because I've had it many times. As a matter of fact, one of the people I just described to you was... As a matter of fact, one of the people I just described to you was me. Not the TLC lady. My British accent is very fake. But for as long as I can remember, I've sat in rooms and I thought, I am the only person, like the only woman or mom who is struggling with something like this. But the struggle that I remember the most was a woman named Tracy, and this is the last story. Tracy was in my Sunday school class, and she was stunningly beautiful and incredibly fit. Looked like she could run a marathon and then do a runway show as a bathing suit model. Now, she was particularly blessed in ways that, frankly, most of us aren't. I certainly wasn't blessed like that. So we were both in this Sunday school class that I loved. It was one of these deep, rich, meaty classes where we wrestled through tough topics, kind of like we do here on Christian Parent Crazy World. It was right up my alley. But Tracy never spoke in class. She was really quiet. And then one day, she opened her beautiful mouth to say something, and we all waited on bated breath to hear what she had to say because, well, she never spoke. But this day, she had something to say, and she tried. But she stumbled over her words. Then she opened her mouth again and stumbled over her words. And then she got really quiet, and she tried one more time, and yet again, she stumbled over her words. And it was so painfully awkward and heartbreaking. She couldn't even get enough out for us to help her. We couldn't figure out what she was trying to say. And then with her eyes just welling up with tears, she looked down to the floor and she whispered, I'm not like you guys. I'm not smart. I didn't go to college. And I don't know what you're talking about half the time. And I can't make my words come out right. And we were stunned. I was stunned. I thought Tracy had it all. I thought she had everything I didn't. Thought her life was perfect. I thought she was normal and I was the freak. But here she was, thinking the same thing about me. And I realized we are all looking at each other through these glasses that are tainted with our brokenness and our defects and our struggles and our failures. And we all have this desire to be, drum roll please, normal. And usually there's something like one thing or a few things that block our way to that place called normal. I can't have kids, or my dad left, or I'm not smart, or I'm not healthy, or I have this humiliating physical defect, or I never have enough money to pay my bills, or I'm the only single person in a church filled with married people. And boy, does this seep into our parenting, because when we are preoccupied with what we don't have, we can't possibly parent well. We certainly can't be godly parents. And very often, all too often, we just want to have a normal family with normal issues and normal kids. And we don't. Like, none of us do. So yeah. Moms and dads, the desire we have that is sabotaging our parenting and our purpose, that desire is to have a life that is normal, to be like everyone else. You know, there is a reason why we have the 10th commandment. That's the one about not coveting, not wanting what everyone else has that we don't. So a few years back, I was really struggling with what keeps me from feeling normal. And I wrote a piece that I titled very simply, Normal. And I want to share that with you today. It's a little artsy and a little poetic, but you know, that's how I roll. I pray sincerely that it blesses you, because as you will see, and as we turn the corner on this thing that we don't have, the thing that keeps us from feeling normal in our lives, that is the very thing God, this is so amazing. It's the very thing that leads us to the place that we desperately need to be. This is normal. There's a place I've always wanted to live, but I've only seen from afar. Other people live there, I think. At least it looks like they do. A few times I visited this place in a dream, but then I woke. I'm not allowed to go there, you see, because of this thing I live with that most women never do. They have what I want more than anything. They have what I don't. They have a home in a place called normal. I've had the thought, if only, about 100 million times, but this thing is always there, messing with the rhyme, blocking the way to normal. Of course, she lives in that place called normal. So does he, along with him and her. They all live there in their normal homes, and they drive their normal cars and drop off their normal kids at a normal school, and then they go to their normal job. Only they don't really live there, do they? At least not for any length of time. That thing they struggle with, that thing that blocks their rhyme, is every bit as real. It's just different than mine. Normal is a fiction, a fairy tale, a farce. It's a city with no citizens, a ghost town filled with ghosts. It is a neighborhood of vacant shops and restaurants, churches and homes, but no folks to fill them. It is the perfect Christmas village on the mantle with make-believe people and a make-believe time. Perfect, idyllic, blissful, tranquil, sublime. Why? Why do I want to live there so desperately? Surely any citizen of normal would be naive and shallow, untested and weak. Surely she couldn't accomplish anything significant or special or even satisfying or unique. And yet, normal occupies my mind like a catchy tune that I just can't shake. I sing that song over and over, and all the while it makes me ache. If only I could live there. If only I could arrive. If only this thing did not exist. I would not have to strive so hard for whatever either woman has. Yes, that woman has it all. But what I don't know, what I can't see, is that she looks at me and longs for the thing I have, the thing I wrap my arms around, the thing I take for granted, the thing that blocks her way to the tantalizing shore, the thing that all the other women in her elusive land of normal have, the thing that never even crosses my mind. Normal is the siren that beckons from the rocky shore, calling us to come. We embark on this never-ending journey to get there. But this jagged obstacle stands in the way. The sharp edges cut us, leaving scars we cannot hide. We cannot land. We cannot live there. We cannot be normal. No one can. You see, normal is one of the devil's greatest hits. Everyone lives there, he says, but you never will. It is a half-truth, because that jagged obstacle is real. Oh, so very real. But God says something very different about you. He says that thing that keeps you from normal is your strength. It beckons you to another shore, the shore where my grace abounds in your weakness, where you press into the fullness of who I am and who I've called you to be. If you were normal, you wouldn't need him. Normal people don't need God, which means normal people don't exist. We weren't created to be normal. We were created to be needy, in need of a God who covers the weak, lost, dying, broken, and barren places in our lives. Dear God, give us a new song. May the need that feeds our quest for normal take us to a higher place, to the shores of your unending grace, covered underneath your wings, as on our knees we seek your face. May the land of need be filled with jewels normal shores cannot supply, precious stones and gems we cannot buy, treasures found as we bow low and stretch our hands up to the sky. And he hath said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for power is perfected in weakness. 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9. Heavenly Father, help us to reject the lie of normal and embrace the truth of need, knowing that you meet us in this tender place, and there you cover us with your grace. And my God will supply all your needs according to the riches of his glory in Christ Jesus. Philippians 4:19. I'm not sure who else needed this today, but I know that I did. If you would like a copy of this piece of Normal, I'm re-releasing this blog on my website at catherineseekers.com, so you can see it there, and you can get a transcript of the whole episode by subscribing at catherineseekers.com. Next week, we will jump back into a tough topic, but for now, know that no one lives in normal, but God will meet you in all of your needs. I want to thank you for joining me today. Look, I know there are a lot of things you could be listening to right now, and I really appreciate that you took this time to spend with me. I hope you will join me for my next podcast when we take aim at some aspect of our culture that threatens to derail our parenting and steal our kids' faith. If you enjoyed this episode of Christian Parent Crazy World, would you consider telling a friend and sharing it on social media and giving it a good review over on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and following me on Facebook and Instagram? Oh, and maybe you could say that Christian Parent Crazy World is the best podcast you've ever heard in your entire life. Just a thought. And be sure to check out my website, which is catherineseekers.com. That's Catherine with a C. I have lots of articles and resources there that will help you on your parenting journey. And if you subscribe, I will be sure to send you some really cool free stuff and notify you of future podcasts, articles, and blogs. I want to end this and every episode with a word of encouragement. God gave you your kids, your specific kids, for a reason. That's because you hold the key to unlocking who God created them to be. We'll see you next time.
Christian Parent Crazy World is a production of Life Audio and Salem Media. If you liked what you heard today, please take a second to rate and review this podcast in your favorite podcast app so that more listeners like you can find the show. For more faith-filled, inspirational podcasts, visit us at lifeaudio.com.